Today is Tuesday, July 1st, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. The Idaho murder suspect has been identified. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Subscribe and leave a rating. You can email us your thoughts as well. quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Joining me today to get through all the news of the day, CBN's Billy Hallowell and Tre Phillips. And guys, a lot to get to, as always, on the podcast today. On the focus story, a 20-year-old claims God saved his life with a divine intervention. What happened there?
Yeah, this story is crazy. He was shot in the chest. He should have died. He is alive, and we'll get into the very thing he believes saved him.
It's awesome. Incredible update there. Looking forward to the details on that in just a few moments. On the main thing, Joshua Broome weighed in on the Supreme Court's age verification ruling and what comes next. That conversation's coming up on the main thing. Don't forget to subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts, including Newsmakers, Faith and Culture, Navigating Trump 2.0, Heaven Meets Earth. You can find all of those in the description of this podcast episode. And with that, we are going to head to the news in 90 seconds. And he's been identified. 20-year-old Wes Rowling allegedly set a wildfire on Canfield Mountain near Coeur d'Alene to lure first responders into a trap. When firefighters arrived Sunday afternoon, Rowling opened fire from the woods, killing 2 and critically injuring a 3rd. Frantic 911 calls have been released. They captured the chaos, and the firefighters knew almost instantly what had happened, that they'd been lured into a trap. Police found Rowling's body near his weapon. It's still unclear if he was killed by officers returning fire or if he took his own life. Investigators have yet to confirm a motive, but some online point to a chilling date connection 24 years ago to the day Coeur d'Alene firefighters burned down a former Aryan Nations compound nearby in a training exercise. An 82-year-old Karen Diamond has died from severe burns after a Molotov cocktail attack during a demonstration supporting Israeli hostages earlier this month. Prosecutors say Mohammed Sabri Soliman, an Egyptian national living in the U.S. illegally, posed as a gardener to get close, then hurled firebombs at the crowd. And a BBC News anchor is being applauded worldwide for acknowledging a simple truth while reporting on heat-related deaths, corrected a phrase in the script that read pregnant people and simply said, i.e. women, before moving on. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. Guys, it's getting ridiculous now that this is essentially like an act of bravery here, or somehow notable that somebody would make this correction. But given the times we live in, having a BBC presenter, journalist make this correction is definitely noteworthy, and the BBC actually backed her correction, calling it a, quote, innocent mistake that she rightly fixed on the spot.
Yeah, no, it's an important story, and it's been reverberating over the past, week. And I think because people are realizing that, when you bravely stand up and tell the truth,
yeah,
it's a shocker. Yeah, it is. You're in the upside down though when telling the truth is brave. You're in the upside down when like being abstinent until you're married is brave. These are all things that like are common sense, but yet now when you do them,
Yeah, especially like on something as basic that everyone learned growing up and everyone knows that only women can get pregnant, yet here we are having to clarify that.
Right. I think the whole thing is just, it's a ridiculous debate. Like you said, Billy, that this is brave. It's clear, I think, that we are living in the upside down world these days, but it's just, the irony never fails to smack me in the face of all of this, right? Because all of this is coming from the side of the political aisle that is constantly about, let's protect minorities. Let's protect women from the evil patriarchal white man. And it's like, well, who are you going to protect? You can't tell if a white man is a white man. Maybe he's a woman. You don't even know what the target is. The goalposts are constantly moving. So, I think there's just a lot of rich and unfortunate irony in a lot of this. But good for that reporter for doing what she did.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the simple things these days we can celebrate. So, all right, we are going to head now to the focus story. And as Billy mentioned there at the top, man, this is pretty wild. This 20-year-old from Florida claiming God miraculously intervened to save his life. Tell me about what happened here.
Yeah, this is Aiden Perry. He's a 20-year-old who was just feet away from a .40 caliber pistol on June 7th when he was shot in the chest. And, just again, being 8 to 10 feet away from this bullet. It was really an incident that should have abruptly ended his life. But God apparently had other plans. And just so people have clarity on this, he was shot, but it apparently was not intentional. It was an incident in which somebody else was showing off a gun, accidentally shot the firearm, and it shot Aiden in the chest. Now, the way he describes it, he says, "I looked down, I see tons of blood. I thought I was going to die, honestly." But he is crediting God with saving his life. And the thing that's so crazy about this is that he was wearing a cross necklace that he got for Christmas. And it was the bullet hitting that cross that saved his life. Instead of going directly into his chest, the cross split in two and it sent the bullet basically through his armpit away from where it would have killed him. And so the cross itself and God very literally saved his life.
Unbelievable. And what are the doctors saying about this whole incident?
Yeah, I mean, the doctors are agreeing that it was, miraculous. They're saying he was very lucky. He was very fortunate. Dr. Kafra Garcia Henry, she said the bullet ricocheted off the necklace and entered his chest small. She said, however, it was just in his fat tissues because it slowed down the trajectory of the bullet. The cross she's referring to there, slowing down the trajectory of the bullet. Again, called him extremely lucky. She said the bullet could have entered his chest wall itself into the pleural space, which is the airspace around the lung between the bones, and injuring his lung itself or his heart. So it's pretty wild. The doctors are also dumbfounded by how this turned out.
And how has this impacted Aiden's faith? I'm sure it's had to have some cause for reflection here when you have a close call like this.
Yeah, he said that he believed in God, obviously, before this, but he said this has really increased his belief and strengthened it. He said it's just kind of a reminder now to never stop believing, keep believing, and God's definitely real. So it's pretty powerful to see, how he reacted to this, and now he's sharing that with the world and saying that God, saved his life. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And these incidents, while scary, these near-death experiences, it's a blessing in disguise for these people that are going through it, because, it's very easy to go throughout life and sort of take for granted our next breath, our next hour, our next day, our next week. You can kind of just go along and you're just engaging in the grind of the day to day, and you kind of forget that every breath is actually a gift. And an incident like this certainly causes you to reflect on your mortality and just how close we are to potentially not being here anymore. And it's something like that. Now, so there's that. And then the second part is just, man, be careful when you're using firearms in any way, even just looking at them. I mean, it's just incidents like this make you just say, come on, please just be careful. You got to have trigger discipline. You've got to be never aiming that thing at somebody, even if you don't think it's loaded. Just don't do it. It's just not worth it. And so glad that he's going to make it through. I think his friend that was showing him is going to get charged with negligence or something like that. But still, glad he's okay, but incredible to see the fragility of life. And hopefully that gives us all a chance to ponder that.
Yeah, I think all the rules about gun safety, for sure, sometimes they can feel kind of silly, especially if you're somebody who's familiar with firearms, but you should always follow those, because you just never know, like when some crazy accident might happen. But, I think we spend plenty of time on this podcast, and for good reason, talking about the dangers and the pitfalls of the internet, and that there are a lot of crummy things and even terrible things that happen online. But we wouldn't know about stories like this if we didn't have the internet, right? It's so widespread, and who knows how God is using it to bring somebody to himself, right? So I think it's awesome that we're able to all around the world, at least all around the country, read stories like these, know what's happening, and hear ways that God has intervened, often miraculously, as in stories like this. So yeah, this is a benefit of the internet, and I think we should celebrate those too.
Absolutely. Billy, final thoughts on this one?
Yeah, it's nice to have a story like this after all the chaos we've had the last few weeks in the news, to see something like this happen. And when this happens, I always say to myself, what does God have planned for this person? Yeah. Because there has to be something. There's some reason he intervened in that scenario to stop what could have been a really bad situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Nevertheless, whatever reason he's going through it, we're glad it worked out the way it did, and there weren't any worse injuries involved. And they're going to be able to go forward from here. So appreciate you bringing that one to the podcast today. And we're going to head over to the main thing now. Next porn star and now devoted Christian Joshua Broome is on a mission to stand up against the industry he was once part of. He's a preacher now, and he joined Billy and Tre to discuss the Supreme Court's age verification ruling and what comes next. That conversation is today's main thing.
Joshua Broome, a lot to talk with you about today. Obviously, the Supreme Court upholding Texas's age verification law. This was big news, one of the big cases to come from the court last week. What was your reaction to seeing this ruling come down?
I'm surprised. I thought that for sure it was going to be best case scenario, a remand where they're going to sit it down to a lower court and they were going to fight over some, nuance. But I was shocked. And I think this is a huge deal because it stands precedent for it to be a national implication. So I think this is just a huge, huge deal. I am pumped about it. And to be honest, it's this, it's tough to be super excited about it because the reality is that for there not to be age verification in the first place is actually negligent. So it's like the frustration of, okay, we're finally where we should be, and let's move forward from here.
Yeah, I was listening the other day to an interview with Jonathan Haidt, and he was saying everywhere else we've kind of decided, like in the real world, we've decided who's an adult and who's a child. You can't buy alcohol, you can't vote, you can't buy cigarettes, all of these things until you're a certain age. But on the internet, it's kind of the Wild West. There is no sort of protection until we have laws like these. And like you said, we should have had them long ago. But for people who are maybe a bit skeptical or cynical, what kind of assistance, like, is this actually going to help parents, these age verification laws? Are they actually useful? Are they worth having?
Yeah, I mean, number one, age verification since the inception of pornography was just, hey, click a box. Are you 18?
Right.
Sure. And it was almost like, walking into a convenience store trying to buy alcohol saying, I promise I'm 21. So it is no verification at all. And what we've seen, so Louisiana was the first state to actually implement legislation when this was first talked about. And what we saw in Louisiana is consumption went down 8% because guess what? People don't want to leave an actual digital footprint when they want to watch pornography. It's the same thing that, it deters anyone from doing anything they don't want to be seen doing. And I think that's the most problematic thing of pornography is that you can do that without truly leaving behind breadcrumbs. So I think it's certainly helpful.
All right, so I'm going to ask you this question because obviously the coalition, the porn industry coalition that was challenging this, the free speech coalition, their big claim was that this violated free speech rights for adults, right? So what is your reaction to that? Because that was the argument they were putting forward, that somehow this was a restriction of free speech.
Yeah, I mean, so they're saying that, this is an infringement on their First Amendment rights, and that's ridiculous because if you're going to have anything in the public square that has been deemed potentially dangerous to children or just people in general, well, you have to put parameters around this thing. And we've seen there's significant neurological studies that have said, hey, if a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old, 8 years old is the average age of consumption. If their prefrontal cortex, which is the thing that allows them to regulate their emotions, if it's around 50% or less developed, and pornography actually deteriorates the part of the brain that is currently 50% developed, obviously this is a dangerous thing for kids to engage in. And as a follower of Jesus, I would say, gosh, the implications regarding like sex, identity, all these things, it has terrible implications. But their pushback to say, hey, you're taking away my right to see something. Well, it clearly, according to the Supreme Court, which I was not shocked that they upheld that. I was shocked that they upheld it completely, but it's not a barrier; it's a boundary. It's saying, hey, if you want to watch it, do the requirement, provide your ID, and if you're 18 or older, then watch it all you want. So it's in no way an infringement on your rights; it's just a barrier.
How do you, Josh, see this practically impacting the porn industry? Because for somebody like me, I live in Virginia. We have similar laws in place. And what ultimately has happened, like in several states, is the largest porn site has just said, you know what, we're going to block the site altogether. You can't even access the site in the state of Virginia. Ironically, they think that that's some sort of like win for them, like there, but really our governor just said, oh great, you're doing my job for me. There are a lot of states that are making similar moves, and now with this Supreme Court precedent, do you think that this ends with just porn leaving these states altogether?
I mean, you look back at so in 2012 in Los Angeles County, which was where 80% of the pornography that was filmed, that's where all the studios were. And in Los Angeles County, they decided to implement a condom mandate, and this was right after I got out of the industry. So I'm on these sets 20 plus times a month. And some people are saying, like, are they actually, implementing this? Are there any kind of checks and balances? Every single time I was on a set, there was always a police officer that stopped by and asked, "Hey, where's your permit?" Obviously, they're why they were there. That's up for a different conversation. But yes, like a police officer was checking, was there a permit each and every time. So with that said, in 2012, condoms were mandated in Los Angeles County. The entire industry picks up and moves to Las Vegas. So this is something that they've done in the past. So where they can't thrive, will they geographically move? Probably, but then you have OnlyFans and things like that. So the way that people consume and even create pornography is drastically changed. So my hope would be, yes, to your point, where there is the implementation, this verification, like Louisiana, 80% drops off, and Pornhub thinking, hey, or, other sites thinking, hey, if we pull out of this state, there's going to be people with picket signs saying, hey, give me back my porn. And that's not realistic. So it's interesting to see what they'll do. They probably thought that they would win this to some extent, but the same thing, man. I was at Capitol Hill 4 years ago, and we were talking about this age verification. And before it had even made it to the ears of everyone that was in the room, Pornhub had already created something called VPN Hub, and it was created to go around the VPN that was installed on your phone. And there's many other pieces of technology that exist right now that people are creating technology and use. Hey, download this on your phone, and you can bypass the age verification. So how does that? I think there's going to have to be legislation written with nuances to, hey, you can't use AI to go around legalities. So it's going to be complicated. So I think will they pull out of every state? I don't know, but I think that and Section 230, it just allows social media to be a place where pornography can be housed. So I wouldn't be surprised if Twitter turns into Pornhub, because it would be financially advantageous for them to do so, and they're not far from it today.
All right, appreciate that conversation there, and you can look forward to the full conversation on the CBN News YouTube channel. All right, that's going to leave us with time on the pod today for one last thing.
We've got Acts 4:12. Salvation is found in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to mankind by which we must be saved. It's all about Jesus. He is the only one. So it's a good reminder.
Yeah, especially in a world where we live with so much rampant, vague spirituality, reminders that Jesus is the one and only way to heaven is important.
Amen. Good spot to leave it on this edition of the Quick Start Podcast as we kick off July. And as always, get yourself on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. And Lord willing, that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back here tomorrow with more. God bless. We'll see you then. Enjoy the rest of your day.